Hi everyone, I just wanted to show you how experimental my setup is to film these videos. So we've got what you see on camera, and this is how my microphone is placed. Yep, we've got a chair on a chair. We've got this light source, which is basically holding thanks to this, yeah, here we go. Oh, come on. That's one light source. Another light source is down there. We've got our laundry here that's drying inside. That's another light source that isn't going really well, if I can say this. So yeah, I'm kind of struggling. I would enjoy a slight investment in some better equipment. That would be great. Here are just a few examples of the consequences of such a crappy setup. Je pense que là c'est quand même un peu mieux. To a few... Oh non, le soleil! Bon, tant pis. So just before shooting the previous video's intro, I tried repairing my second light source. Alright. But then I had to go pick it up, cause it's not the right container. So day 7 was mostly focused on preparing the UI for the arrival of the player powers. I started with this simple button to show and hide the human's inventory. Then I started working on the actual environment points UI. UI is always a tough task. I'm still not very confident with my UI building skills, so I kept it very simple at first, and I implemented the logic for the player to gain environment points simply with time passing. I then started working on a panel to display all the environment powers. But as you can see, the MiniFantasy panels weren't fitting quite well the aspect ratio I was looking for, so I had to modify one of them to make it a bit wider, even a bit more. There we go. We now have a nice panel where we can store our power categories. And by clicking on one of these categories, it expands another menu where we actually store the powers within this category. Just to make things slightly prettier, I expanded the environment points bar and switched its color to make it fit the environment points icon. So next on building the UI list is a description panel to show information on the hovered environment power. This panel should include the power name, its cost, a short description of the power, and it should be displayed whenever the player hovers over a button, and of course be hidden when the player hovers out of the button. I handled that well, I think, except maybe I'm not following strictly the clean code principles, but I don't have time for this. The last thing added to this description panel is an icon that should match with the icon on the power button. I also added a few outlines to make things pop out a bit more, and as you can see here, everything seems to be working, and I have to admit, I was feeling proud. But before starting to work on the actual powers, I had a few things left on my checklist. I started working on changing the mouse cursor when the player selects an environment power, and a variation of this cursor that is shown when the player hovers over a valid target for that environment power. This may not seem as such, but it's a very important addition to hand information to the player in a very subtle way. Another important information the player should be warned of is when he tries using a power and he does not have enough environment points. So I added this blinking text and made the color of the number change at the same pace, and later I'll complement this with a sound effect. The very last addition to this system before starting to work on the powers is an unlocking mechanic, so the player has to spend a certain amount of points to unlock the power before starting to use it. I'm not sure it's a great addition to this game, but anyways it was an interesting system to set up, so no regrets. So the system is very simple. As you can see on the button and on the description panel, the power is locked, the unlocking cost is displayed on the top right of the description panel, and when the player clicks on it with enough environment points, he just unlocks it. So that was one whole day of building the UI and its related systems, but I was now ready to start working on the actual gameplay of this game. But that's for tomorrow. The Witcher 3 is a game I used to play at university in Belgium with a friend. We would pass the controller and go through the side quests, and when I wasn't there he would play the main quests. But I never played it on my own, and I had recently seen a very interesting video of Rasputin talking about difficulty, where he shared his experience with The Witcher 3. He had a first run where he played in normal difficulty, and he thought the game was good, but did not push you to exploit every one of its systems and mechanics. On some advice from his friends, he tried again, but with the hardest difficulty. And apparently it was a great experience. He was really immersed and feeling like a witcher that had to use every possible system to stay alive and complete its tasks. And me too, I also wanted to feel like a witcher. So I launched the game in the highest difficulty, and I died multiple times in the first encounter with the ghouls. But I kept hope because Rasputin had the exact same experience. On this first gaming session, I reached a point where you fight against the griffin, which is the first creature you actually fight. The fight was kind of a chore, the griffin had way too many HP, and I was awfully equipped to handle this, but I handled it. I guess. We'll see if I manage to make it to the next creature. On day 9, my UI and its systems were up and running, and I could now finally start working on the actual player powers, on the actual gameplay of this game. For testing purposes, I had already built the slay an animal power, so I decided to build its equivalent but for the plants. And now the player can burn any target that is marked as a plant, so those are resource sources like a tree or a bush, or fruit trees. I wanted to have an upgrade of these powers in the game, so I created an area of effect version of both of these, so now the player can slay animals in an AoE or burn plants in an AoE. Of course, both these powers will be more expensive to unlock and to use. You might have noticed a slight problem in the burn plants in an AoE, but that was simply due to the colliders on the plants that were just too large. I then started working on a new category of environment power related to water. The only simple idea around water I had at the moment was the ability for the player to drain a lake by clicking on it. This introduces a very interesting way of harming the human by making him thirsty. So I created 2 new cursors for this power, and I had to rethink all over the way I implemented water bodies, because at the moment they were included in the tile map, but that didn't make it very convenient to drain them in a simple way. So I just implemented a new object, which is a lake, that has an empty and a full visual. This system is less versatile to make new water body shapes, but it's a game jam project and I'm not a AAA studio. Again, it was actually very fun to see my human reacting in real time to me draining the lakes. Draining lakes seems like a very powerful power, so I'll set its cost and its unlock cost pretty high, I think. The last environment power on my priority list is the ability for the player to spawn a predator. So first, I had to implement a predator behavior. I started with a wolf and made him basically chase prey every given amount of time. That raised a game design decision. Does an animal killed by a predator still drop its items? I thought it would make sense if the animal drops its skin, but not its food, since the predator might have eaten it. To make the human's life a bit more complicated, I added a lifespan to the items so that they wouldn't stay there indefinitely. But now the predator's life was too easy, so I added a fleeing behavior to the prey, which of course caused a problem on my human AI. Because I marked the human as a predator too, the animals would flee the human, but for fast enough animals, the human could never catch up with them while hunting. So I reworked the way the food score was calculated from an animal. Now the animal's food score also takes into account the time for the player to reach the animal, which in turn also takes into account the differential of speed between the fleeing speed of the animal and the movement speed of the human. This is why on the wolf and on the deer you can see the time to reach the animal is infinite, which make the food score drop to 0. So these food sources will never be targeted by the human. Of course, I wanted the wolf to be able to attack the human. So that was pretty easy to implement, but I also wanted the ability for the human to counterattack the wolf, of course, which led to a very interesting visual bug. This occurred when the human was attacked by a wolf while sleeping. In the AI, he would wake up and counterattack the wolf, but the visual didn't follow the behavior. We were already day 8 and there was less than 1 week left to finish the game jam, so my fix wasn't very clean, and I would start doing dirty fixes more and more. My predators were now working and I wanted to add more of them. Although the MiniFantasy Assets have a ton of creatures, link to the MiniFantasy itch page in the description. Go check them out, they're awesome. They do lack in very basic predators. We have a wolf, I found a bear, and the last predator I found that would fit this grassy biome is an otter. You heard right? An otter. And I checked. It's a predator. A small one, but it's still a predator. So I guess the otter will only attack rabbits. Setting up the animations for the predators does take quite a while, and I enjoy these moments a lot because I just switch on music and sometimes you can hear me sing. And on hungry and fast, I need someone to help us. Yes, even on Aurora. Oh, take me home, where I belong. Animation's ready, I can now test the new predators. Except the human doesn't stop foraging. Okay, but now he still doesn't attack. What the hell is the bear doing? Finally! Got this working, okay. I also adapted the UI and the spawn predator power in order to take into account the new predators, and I was happy with the result. It was working, I could spawn predators. The only thing I wanted to change is to set a limit around the human where the player can't spawn any predators, or it will lead to situations like this one. So I set this tiny tweak, and I added a small error message to warn the player of what's happening. So with the predators eating the prey on the map, we would soon face a problem. After a while, there won't be any prey left on the map. So I created an animal spawner that would spawn the desired animal every given interval and until a maximum given number of animals. With our player being able to spawn new predators, our human though is still totally naked. What better excuse to give a new purpose to this human? Try crafting some protection equipment, and of course weapons to defend himself. I thought it was a good idea to create a new interface where would be stored all the crafted equipment and the crafted items like consumables. But getting this interface right was quite hard. With 3 armor slots, 1 weapon slot and all the equipment, it was hard not to get this feel cluttery. But it ended up okay. With the UI ready, I could now start thinking about the actual equipment system. And at first it seemed to be working. The armor would fit in the armor slot. But soon I discovered a myriad of new bugs. Like this one where the human is super chill with crafting his tier 3 equipment with no animal skin in his inventory. And now with less than 5 days left to finish my game, I decided to completely give up on plead code principles.
Copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. Copy, copy, paste.
Will I regret this? Yes. Did I have a choice? Not really. Keeping up with the clean code principles does take some time, and when you're so close to the deadline and you have so much to implement, I think I had no choice. I hadn't actually prepared the weapon slot yet, so I had to change my UI again. And once I got all of this equipment system working, there was one last critical functionality to add, because the human would equip stuff, but at the moment it had no impact on his stats. The last thing I did on day 9 was to assign stat boosts to the different equipment, and to update the human stats when he would equip stuff. At the moment there is no way for the player to see these effects, but I will create an adapted UI on the next day. I wanted to make this UI even cleaner by making a separate panel for the status bars. Now to the stats panel, well, it's just a basic panel that will display when you decide to show the equipment panel. In there you'll see the human armor, damage and speed. So my UI started looking cleaner, but now the human could equip weapons while only having 1 attack animation with a sword, which is not even an item in the game. So I added new attack animations, a punch animation, an attack with a spear, and an attack with a bow. And I was happy to see it was pretty easy to implement them in-game. I felt like I was slowly getting to the point I could finally start playtesting the game and balancing. There were just a few critical things left to do, like a map, a main menu, an end level screen, and a tutorial. With these items in mind, I started with the first task, which is building a map. I wanted a map to be large enough to have different distinct areas where each area would have its weaknesses and strength, but not too big because I'm short on time, and anyways it wouldn't be very useful to have such a huge map. So now I had my lakes placed, a few trees that would drop some wood, the 2 bush types and rocks, but despite the texture I added with all these grass variations, the level still feels very bare bone. So I added other types of trees, but these trees would not serve as a resource source, because that would mean having to add another sprite, which is only the tree trunk, and that's also some work, and I'm still short on time. But now I realize this was a bad idea because it's confusing for the player. He doesn't know which trees yield some wood or not, and with the burn plan mechanic, well, the player has a great chance of burning just props, making this action useless. But at the time I'm recording this, I'm really in a tunnel, and I'm not thinking further than my current task. And it actually looked better once the trees were there. The 2 last things to add on this map were animal spawners, preys and predators, and I also created different spawn points for the human in order to have more variety in the initial conditions, which should increase the replayability of the game. I then just wanted to press play in order to check if everything was still working, since I just reset the whole map. And it was working, so I was happy. I could now start building the second item on the list, which is an end level screen. This screen will trigger when the human dies, and it should show the current score and the best score. As simple as that. Oh, and it should also have a button to try again and a button to go back to the main menu. Ideally, it should also have a button to quit the game, but I totally forgot that. Well, not ideally, it just should have a button to quit the game. You shall not quit the game. Third item on the list. Main menu. I didn't have much time, so I had an idea, creating a main menu where the camera also follows the human just doing his life. I think this turned out great, and it was really effortless to build. Of course it was effortless, there's only 2 buttons. Day 10 was super satisfying to finish because it felt like a very productive day. I made some tweaks on the UI, created a level map, created a main menu, an end level screen. I tested that and it seemed to be working fine. I think I'm ready to start playtesting the game now. But the day was ending and it was time for me to go back to my Witcher 3 game on the hardest difficulty. Last session, we left at the moment Geralt just killed the griffin. In the meantime, I did a few side quests, but the main quest brought me back to this moment where I have to help this poor villager that is surrounded by 3 dogs. The dogs are level 2 and my character is level 2. Being on the hardest difficulty, I expected this to be a fair challenge. I arrived at the fighting spot with half HP, so I need to change the meat I have in my inventory in the consumable slot, eat it. I cast Quen in preparation of the fight to be immune to the first hit I suffer. And as a battle opener, I try to cast Igni on all the dogs as they're pretty sensible to fire. And the ghouls from the last session were just a mere training for this battle. Okay, equip my meat, eat it, cast Quen, cast Igni. It's okay, I'm used to this, I've played Dark Souls. Okay, so, equip my meat, cast Quen, really Tao, does it look like an appropriate time?
Qu'est-ce que tu fais là? Non!
And I forgot to eat my meat.
Putain!
Okay, from now on, I'll be skipping the preparation part.
Putain! Putain, allez, j'en ai plein le cul, c'est bon.
Maybe I shouldn't have started this game on the hardest difficulty. On day 11, the objective was to playtest and balance my game. As I don't have many parameters to balance, I started simple with a sheet of paper and pens. I had to find adequate values for the human's health, speed, damage and range, as well as each equipment's boost value on these parameters. I also had to handle the animal's health, HP and speed, and I think I had set the crafting recipes to the right amount of items, so that was one thing less to worry about. My methodology was pretty simple. The first objective was for the human to be able to survive indefinitely without any intervention from the player. But as I tested for the first time, I soon realized there were many tweaks to be done before starting this methodology. First of all, I wanted him to faint when the energy bar reaches 0, because at the moment he's just taking damage, which makes him die really stupidly while trying to go back to his bed. Secondly, once he's crafted everything he has to craft, or that he can't craft anything at the moment, he's just stuck doing nothing. So in this situation, I want him to take an action to fill one of his status bars. Thirdly, in order to increase his survivability, I'd like the human to interrupt his current action when one of his status bars reaches a critical threshold of like 10%, for example. Because at the moment when the human is in a series of actions, like for example collecting resources to craft a bed, he won't interrupt until he's finished collecting all the resources. But in real life, if you're dying from thirst, you would stop crafting your bed and go drink. And since I had been very careful with respecting all the clean code principles, all these little tweaks were super easy to implement and led to absolutely no bugs. No! It keeps moving. And heading back to my clean code principles, I was ready to debug this.
Copy, paste.
Why the hell is he moving while fainting? Come on, I don't get it. Nothing is working. This is not working. Sleeping is not working. So is the feint working? No, the feint is not working. He's sleeping and moving at the same time. You sleeping, moving human. I'm done with this game. Please make it end. More bugs, more bugs. Why would I change my methodology if it's working so well? Copy, paste. Let's check that right now. Let's empty that energy bar. Oh yeah. I didn't show you, but it was at least as hard to implement the 2 other tweaks I talked about. There were still 2 more tweaks I wanted to do in the human's AI. I wanted him to be able to craft a new bed or campfire when he's too far from his other bed or campfire. That will make him establish multiple bases on the map, and I think it can increase his survivability by a lot. I'd also like him to craft his campfire close to his already crafted tent, or the other way around. This way he's not losing time going from one to another doing his daily tasks, thus increasing his survivability too. No, it didn't work! Should have been moving down there. I think now he's going to go back to his camp to craft a fire, which now is going to seem like it's a camp. Awesome. At the beginning of the day, when I tried playtesting the game, I realized it was pretty hard for the player to have all the information he needs just by looking at the screen. So I wanted to make the position of the resources way more explicit. I achieved that by creating an icon that would pop up when you dezoom far enough. A fun tweak I had to do in order to make this system work is that I have to increase the size of the icon when the player dezooms. Because if I don't resize it, as the camera zooms out, the icon becomes smaller and smaller. I started by adding this icon to the human, but also to each animal, and the result was pretty satisfying. At the end of day 11, I realized I had accomplished a ton, but absolutely not what day 11 was planned to be. I think I playtested the game 10 minutes at maximum, but anyways, it was time to end this day, and I had planned a gaming session with my friends from Belgium and Nantes. We've played so many different games, but this night was dedicated to Warhammer Vermintide 2. Hacking and slashing through hordes of vermin was exactly what I needed after this day full of bugs. Alright, 2 days left before I submit my game to itch.io. I've rarely been as less motivated as today since the beginning of this adventure. There's nothing much I can do on this game except for balancing, and I'm not that excited to play this game. But anyways, I have to finish it. I'm not gonna leave it unfinished, so let's go! Thankfully, my cat Tao was here to reboost my morale. I love her so much. She's so entertaining and sweet at the same time, although I know she settles on my knees because it's cold. Tao? So, day 12. I started by creating a new environment power category, which I called Vision Powers. In this category, you'll find powers that allow you to unlock intelligence on the human. This addition serves 2 purposes. First of all, it allows the player to make strategic choices between going straight into damaging the human or taking a more long-term strategy by unlocking the different interfaces related to the human. Secondly, it saves the player of being overwhelmed by a huge amount of information right at the beginning of the game. Talking about UI, I spent a while reworking my game's UI for the, I stopped counting, 5th time, and I think I finally reached a version of this UI I'm satisfied with. I also added the icons that pop out when the player dezooms on the fruit trees. In order to make the playtesting feel better, I also wanted to add a music. So I opened the game music library I bought when I started this adventure a few months ago, and I scrolled through a few samples. But these weren't very adapted to the kind of game I was creating. All of a sudden, I stumbled upon this. And straight away, I knew it was the right track. These very sparse piano notes will fit perfectly in this game where you watch a very lonely human trying to survive. And starve him! And I genuinely love this melody. It literally makes shivers run down my spine when I listen to it. I'll just stop talking for a few seconds so maybe you'll feel like I did when I booted up the game with this music for the first time. Having found the perfect song for this game reboosted me to finish it. What you see on screen now is me creating the tutorial for when you boot up the game for the first time. I made this tutorial very basic, with just panels appearing on the screen and handing the useful information to the player before the beginning of the game. Nothing very elaborate here. I was astonished by how a simple soundtrack could really enhance the perception you have of a game. The power of music. At the moment I'm recording this devlog, I still haven't implemented an actual soundtrack in a game yet, since I haven't finished Shepherd on Hire yet, so it was my very first experience with finding the right soundtrack, and oh, I love this. Having finished implementing my tutorial, I could now test it. Oh no. This is not a joke. I really wish it was. It's really exhausting being me sometimes. After reworking my UI again, this was the result. I finished the tutorial right at the moment Roman came back from work, so it was the perfect timing to have her playtest my game as she hadn't played it yet, and as I needed to playtest it too. I thought it would be a great playtesting session, mainly focused on balancing, but it turned out to be more of a bug fixing session than anything else. Even though this playtesting session lasted around 30 minutes, she still gave me a very interesting feedback, maybe due to the fact she's not that used to playing games on PC. Roman was struggling with some environment powers that required to be pretty accurate on clicking the target. So an idea popped out, being able to select the target through the icon when you're zoomed out. Making the hitbox bigger, this makes it easier to click on the target. And it ended with my PC crashing anyways.
Ah bah non.
The first thing I did on this last development day was to implement the idea that popped out on last playtesting session with Roman. But of course, it caused some problems and some bugs. Here, the game just crashed because when using my slay animals in an AoE power, the instruction is given to the animal to die twice. Once when it hits the animal and another time when it hits the icon. The problem is, in Unity, when you give an instruction to something that has already been destroyed, the game crashes. On this last day, I also added sound effects to many different actions like navigating through the UI buttons, some human actions like crafting, drinking, eating, animal actions too, like attacking or dying, and my personal favorite, an ambient sound of nature. If you pay attention, you can hear forest birds in the background. Same as music, I was astonished by the power of sound effects to make your game more polished and lively. It's actually a pretty simple way of making a game look more professional. Talking about polish, the way I handled the animations in my game is terrible. I'll never do it again this way, but the fact is, there is a fixed amount of time set between the moment the animal die animation starts and the moment the animal actually gets destroyed. And since the animals have different die animations durations, some of them repeated themselves at the end of the given duration, and some of them couldn't even finish their animations. I thought I had found a quick and easy fix. Just add here a property. Nah, didn't work. So I gave up on this. Too bad for the animations. At this moment, everything was set up to continue balancing the game, and surprisingly, there wasn't much to do, I think, or at least I was trying to convince myself because I didn't have much time, but I found out it would be interesting to give the human some time at the beginning where he would not be a prey for the predators. So I set up a time limit of, I think, 90 seconds or 2 minutes, where the human is not directly targeted by a predator. That fixed a few problems. The final and last thing I wanted to do before publishing my game was removing this extremely annoying watermark at the top left of the screen. It's been here since the beginning of the development of this game and of my project Shepherd on Hire. It's a watermark that is linked to the A-star pathfinding asset, and I never took the time to dive in the documentation to see how to remove it. And it was actually pretty simple. I found the solution in 15 minutes.
Oh oui, c'est bon. Depuis le début de mes devlogs, depuis le début que je commençais à utiliser ce A-Star Pathfinding, il y a une putain d'icône en haut à gauche qui est là, tu la verras partout pendant tous mes devlogs, et je viens de réussir à l'enlever parce qu'elle était dans mon build et c'est relou quoi.
So yeah, if you were annoyed by this watermark, I'm sorry, and now you won't be bothered by it anymore. The sun was now setting in Arras, and after 2 weeks of pretty intense work on this project, I was ready to publish it on itch.io. It was also the first time I published a project, so I had to learn how to do this, and it took me quite a while. To be honest, I didn't put much effort in the description of my game and the visuals. I was just very happy to be over with it. This game jam was a very interesting experience and I learned a ton. I'm very excited to share all of this with you. As promised, you'll find a link to this game in the description of this video. Feel free to try it out, and if you do, let me know what you think of the very first project I published. Oh, and by the way, welcome to all of you who discovered this channel through this game jam. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe for more indie game dev content. There's huge stuff coming, and yeah, just don't forget to press play and starve the human.